Did your business survive Blackout PT 2020? That's what I'm calling it. You could put a hashtag in front of it. Let's break down the meaning behind business continuity with Jason Cummings from RBC Royal Bank Trinidad and Tobago. We'll be right back. Welcome. Good morning to the live series Straight Off the Bat, a show that covers the need to revive, survive, and adapt to new normal of COVID 19. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals across multiple industries who will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you're joining us from LinkedIn, give us a little smash there on the follow button, and don't forget to like our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing smart succession planning for family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago. We have the great privilege to talk to Jason Cummings. He has an international MBA with a specialization in international finance from Lockjack Global School of Business. He's also the Area Vice President, Small Business Banking, RBC Royal Bank Trinidad and Tobago, where he leads a team of 13 sales professionals who manage the business accounts for the bank's commercial banking line of business. So we have a lot to learn from him, including me, because I have a lot of questions. He also loves to run, so we're going to bring him in and find out what he can teach me about running, especially after my recent sign up for my next Ironman. So I hope he can give me some tips on running there. So Jason, hi.
Hi, Pauline. Morning and welcome to your viewers, our viewers, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever.
YouTube.
YouTube.
We everywhere. Let's talk about business continuity. Before we even get into this whole idea of succession planning with family businesses, what does business continuity mean?
Well, and I'm glad you started off by referencing the events of yesterday. I think of business continuity, and we were speaking offline before. I mean, and this is a specialized part of business management that has become so important over the last couple of years, given changes in technology, geopolitical interferences, weather and climate changes. It's about how does a business change continue when adverse interferences come into its way. I would say in a nutshell, that's business continuity. And when I look at today, what happens the day after an event or an occurrence happens? How is the business prepared to continue in its operations? What has to change for it to continue to survive and to operate to satisfy the needs of its clients and its stakeholders? So that's my own interpretation and definition of business continuity.
But when it comes to business, how does one translate that so the layman person can understand there's this risk involved? Because I find, and I saw this in a recent, I love a show called Insecure. It's on HBO. And one of the episodes was about death, and specifically Black families don't like to have that conversation because personally, I've tried to have that conversation and it's either don't worry, God will find a way, or don't worry about that. That's not for you to study. So in that same mindset and culture, how does one say, okay, listen, you need to actually not just have insurance, but you need to have a plan A, B, and C?
Yeah, and you're correct. I mean, that is something, it's morose. We don't like to think about it, but it's inevitable, Pauline. And as much as we take care of ourselves and all that we can do to, at least live as long as we can, eat healthy, avoid certain, lifestyle choices, it's inevitable. So it's sometimes the elephant in the room for most family businesses. What happens after the death of the owner or the matriarch, the chief influencer or decision maker? And I think it brings or lends itself to having a conversation about continuity. I mean, no one will like to know that they've invested so much of their time and effort in building a business, a brand name, a legacy, and on their departure, it succumbs. So it's about having that conversation pretty early on about how do we continue with this business, not necessarily in its present form, but how do we continue a business operating when the owner or the chief influencer passes on.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
And I want to keep on the same theme because I want you to differentiate the difference between a retirement plan and a succession plan. Because as an entrepreneur myself, I tend to try to combine the two, which is obviously not. I can hear my accountant screaming at me because you feel yourself embedded in the business because you think it's the same.
Yeah.
School us.
Yeah. So I would say the retirement planning is a subset of succession planning. So let's think of succession planning as macro for the business. What happens to the business when given the unexpected departure of the owner, maybe through death or illness, grave illness, and they can't continue, or it may be defined that, okay, on reaching age 75, 70, whatever, I will be relinquishing reins of power to, these identified individuals. Retirement planning now comes, it's more specific, it's more individual, personalized. How am I going to be maintain a particular lifestyle post my working years? So how much money am I going to be setting aside for food, consumables, health expenses, accommodation, lodging, even travel? So it's retirement planning is more specific to an individual. Do I have enough income to support myself during my post-working years? Whereas succession planning deals with a business and how is that business going to continue in the absence of its owner and, as I say, influencer and chief decision maker.
So when it comes to that succession planning and looking at, the different sort of buckets of, hey, this is the possibility of the electricity going, which
Blackout 22.
If I was a betting person, I would have lost money because I wasn't seeing that coming. But at the same time, what's the top 3 things that you have to put into your succession planning when you have that business?
Yeah. So you talk about that, no one knew the electricity was going, but we could have probably planned for electricity going, So I think having a formal document, a formal policy statement saying and identifying, okay, on departure of the owner, this individual will be assuming the reins of power. The second thing will be identifying and clearly stating, because what you don't want on the departure of the individual or the owner is ambiguity. What now do we do with the assets? What now? How are the liabilities going to be treated? Right? So you want to have clarity on that. And I would say, thirdly, is how will be the profits and the future generational wealth? How will that be distributed? Right? So I think, and probably getting ahead of myself, you want to have part of the planning of succession planning is engaging a couple important stakeholders to your business, including your accountant, a lawyer, and like myself, your trusted banker, because you want to ensure that everyone is clear as to how things are supposed to operate when you are no longer around.
What you said earlier about legacy, and making sure that you have that plan, making sure that you're speaking to the right people. And when you are within, let's, hone in on the fact that it's a family business.
Yeah.
What's the first step in making sure that that legacy continues? Because it's one thing to say, let's have a plan, but if you don't have sort of the rhythm of business, how are you going to actually make that plan?
Yeah. So it involves some amount of soul searching by the family owners, because what you may experience and recognize is that for the business to continue, depending on the structure, the internal composition of the management and leadership team, you may not, that capability and leadership may not reside within the organization. So you may have to make a call to step out and hire, let's say, a professional to run the business over a period of time. So you're not relinquishing ownership, but you're relinquishing some amount of leadership and control within defined parameters. And I think what has to be done is that this has to be documented. So you don't want to have, because what you don't want is, as I said, the owner expires or has to leave, because they're gravely ill, and there's uncertainty, there's ambiguity. You have customers calling, what's going on? Production may be halted. You have bankers and, let me just say, financiers on the whole concerned about their, the funds that they have employed in the business. So you want to remove and eliminate as far as possible a lot of that ambiguity and doubt. So it's about being clear in your mind while you are alive or able to make the decisions together with your management team and family owners.
And when it comes to family businesses, and we're talking about succession planning here, what are the most common problems you've seen when it comes to businesses in Trinidad and Tobago?
Yeah. So, that's called tree. Sometimes the business just stops. It holds. So it's like almost literally what to do. So decisions are left unattended. And these decisions that are left unattended have grave consequences. So imagine, let's say you're running a plant and for whatever reason, the owner, succumbs, is no longer around. Some people may not know, okay, what we're going to run on the shift, the quantities of materials that need to be added in. It may sound ridiculous, but that is a possibility. So some decisions are just, left unattended, and in some cases, in an extreme case, the production operations grinds to a halt. And these things have consequences. So clients don't get their product. There's no sale. Eventually, your creditors will be making demands. What happens? Employees don't get paid, and there may, at some point, a adverse or ultimate reaction to that is they could withhold their services. What we've also seen in some cases is that the business continues, but there's some infighting among the family members that, let's say, jockeying for their position on the throne. And it could be very inconsistent, unprofessional when dealing with stakeholders. That, infighting, you may have siblings not carrying on conversations among themselves, or making decisions without consulting others. So the business continues, but it's almost in a topsy-turvy state because there is no, I guess, commonality of thought by the decision makers at that point in time. And a third problem you could encounter is that financial institutions could say, you know what, we are pausing our extending any further credit here to this business. We are concerned about its management, because one of the things bankers look at, not only the ability for the business to repay the funds lent, but is this business going to be around for some time? Definitely as longer than the period of the loan. But if there's uncertainty as to who's in charge, how decisions are being made, you may find banks or financial institutions taking a pause on funding future projects.
I find that very interesting, and I wanted to elaborate on that more because from your space, being in on the banking side, and you're seeing this, how does on your end, how are you aware that this is happening? Can you translate that through the numbers?
Yeah.
How do you know that this is going on in the business?
So sometimes, and this is very real, we may get two sets of instructions for different from different stakeholders within the business, and you may also get simultaneously, please ignore any instruction sent by party X, or vice versa. Right? Staying close to the numbers, you may see there may also be a request not to share information to particular party, to particular parties. So we may be caught in the middle as to in the family squabble.
Fascinating. I just envision an episode of Bold and Beautiful there. I didn't even think about it like that, but you can actually translate the business through the information that's being sent to the bank. And I could see, from an employee perspective as well, how does that, like, I've actually been in family businesses where you see in the squabbling happening, and then you actually are worried about your salary.
Yeah.
Talk about the effects on the employees as well.
No, well, it's real, because I imagine at the end of the day, you have your loyalties, but you definitely want to be paid on either a weekly or fortnightly or monthly basis. When I imagine any employee recognizes instability within the organization in which they work, there will be cause for concern in, is my salary assured at the next pay period? And that creates a different level, a new level of anxiety. So you may have, you're dealing with market conditions, how competitive my product is, or, quality issues, but then could I get paid after I've worked, for a particular period of time? Can I, will this business continue to exist in its current form? And then can I, my own self, continue to make my obligations to the bank and to support my family? So that could be pretty nerve-wracking for employees as well.
That one person usually does 100 things.
Yeah.
So if that person feels that instability and leaves, what happens to the business? Because I can imagine that's a huge gap.
Yeah. That's a big risk. So, and I guess that goes with the whole business continuity team. A key stakeholder within the operation, seeing and observing this, ambiguity, discontent, distrust among family members, and say, you know what, I'm not sticking around for this. I will seek my departure. And we have seen where, key employees, or I would say, they may not have financially contributed to the business, but they have institutional memory of the business operations that they leave. There's no structure or system to that has been documented about their own processes, and yeah, as you said, there's a gap. So some they may be rehired, or the position will be, there's a vacancy, they'll advertise, but that there was no handover. In an extreme case, there's no handover, warm handover. Hopefully there's some sharing or notes that were left behind to be able to pick up on and assess, how do I do this job. It can be extremely debilitating to the continuity and successful continuity of a business if a key employee leaves a business during that time.
Do you have any tips or a specific instruction that you can give to someone listening to this who may have experienced that, or in that position where someone's leaving? What specifically should they do to avoid that drain of information from the business?
Yeah. So I imagine for sure having a defined business continuity plan, and included in that will be the topic we've discussed on succession planning. So you're talking about having manuals of best practices, guides, job aids, go-to cheat sheets, that sort of thing. So those are like at the basics. So, and it could help with an individual who may be going on some sort of predetermined leave or that falls ill. And I'll tell you, Pauline, we've seen this particularly during COVID, with individuals being called away or being away from their desks for a period of time unexpectedly, but the business is expected to continue. So I would say having, your operating manuals, your employee guidelines, and up to date, double checked, refreshed, particularly with the times, we are conducting this interview virtually. There's not much, at least in our space, very limited opportunities for physical interaction. So, even having those guidelines virtually or available online will be beneficial for the continued success of a business, I will say.
I don't want to say failure, but what's the sort of the missing element of succession planning in businesses? What have you seen with family businesses in Trinidad and Tobago?
I would say, sometimes what we've observed is a level of, I would say, maybe a lack of interest by dependents and offsprings. This list could be very long and, way beyond our allotted time. But sometimes not having or wanting to expose the dependents and offspring to, let's say, as many or as much as the not so pleasant parts of the business. And that could be, from a parental point of view, trying to protect and, shield. And I think sometimes not being open enough to the offspring and the dependents as to all that the business has to offer. Because there will be, as much as there are great times and there's a legacy, there are also challenges which businesses have to encounter, when they have to explore or enter new markets and, pound the pavement and get certain linkages and deal with certain government agencies. I don't know if that's always seen by the offspring and the dependents. Sometimes what we've witnessed is there's sometimes a level of, wanting to hold on and not, could be a matter of trust and ability to say, these are all the assets, this is all the income we are earning. So there's a bit of that as well. And I think sometimes it's just also a case of, I'm not sure if you can do it as good as I can. and I have over the last couple of years. You know, so um, I mean, I wouldn't put any in a particular order, but that's sort of randomly. Those are some of the issues we see, and it's unfortunate that a business owner, first generation, has toiled, spent a lot of time to build up a business, and it's not always. I mean, we have tons of examples of successfully run family-owned businesses with intergenerational um, activity. Some in their second and third generation that have done quite well to reinvent themselves, explore new markets, go digital. You know, um, do a lot of expansion in the region, become foreign exchange earners. There are tons. I mean, and the chambers and the business associations are replete with examples. So it's a mixed bag, but I think that we definitely appreciate and know there's a place for family-owned businesses in Trinidad. And I will say, we just want, and I hope through this series and others that BATT offers, we can continue to support family-owned businesses.
As always, be sure to like and follow us on LinkedIn so you don't miss a single live show. And thank you so much for joining us. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.